Ladies and gentlemen, with this game I'm going to present to you today, we can in the very near future say we have been here before the game became famous. This game embodies so many popular game design choices, aspects and gameplay elements from various different genres, and on top of that is inspired by one of the biggest game franchises of all time, that I can't think of a possible scenario where this game isn't climbing the Steam charts. So now the question that remains is, will this game climb the Steam charts for 2 or 3 days and then be buried because of negative Steam reviews due to failing to meet the expectations of the audience? Or will this game actually succeed in all the things it wants to be, which, as you will soon see, are quite a few things. This is definitely a very ambitious game, and with very ambitious games always comes a higher risk. I have done my homework on this one, so you don't need to spend hours figuring out what you should expect from this game. I believe at the end of this video you will have a very good understanding. I have been a huge Pokémon fan for a very long time, especially in my early childhood, but I have also stopped being a huge Pokémon fan quite a long time ago, ever since it was obvious that Game Freak prioritizes profit over everything else. I get it, games cost money and they're not easy to make, but there is no possible scenario in which Game Freak is unable to produce better games with the massive budget and funding at their disposal. This is where I would like to introduce you to the game this video is about, Palworld. But a quick disclaimer first. With this game, I think it's especially important to not give into the hype too much and refrain from putting on too many rose-tinted glasses at once. We don't want to set ourselves up for disappointment after all. So while some excitement is of course absolutely justified here, we are also trying to view this objectively and from a certain standpoint of skepticism. Quite a few games this year have taught us that if something is looking too good to be true, in many cases it is. We are also trying to not compare it to Pokémon too much, and rather view it as a separate game, although certain comparisons are of course natural for this kind of game. Before we get into the many things the game aims to successfully incorporate, here's a quick background of the game. Palworld was first announced in 2021 and has since then received many different gameplay and especially pet reveal trailers. In its essence, Palworld is an open world survival and crafting game where players can interact with mysterious creatures called pals. Additional, notable key features are its over 100 different pals at launch, its focus on base building and production, and the support for multiplayer. Now I think the first thing that's important for you to know is that while this game draws a lot from Pokémon, it is not really a kid-friendly game, in my opinion at least. The game certainly doesn't hold back on the fighting part and is also not afraid to depict it properly, which sometimes can be really cool, but other times also potentially a bit off-putting for certain people, I imagine, especially due to its survival aspect. It does emphasize on that multiple times on the Steam page as well. Take a look at this for example. I don't think I would be able to torture these poor fellas like that. They are way too cute and innocent. Lucky for people like me who don't want to burn sheep alive. The game also makes it pretty clear that you don't have to do this, since there isn't an actual campaign. At least not a very complex one to my understanding. So there is a lot of freedom to be expected here. As I mentioned earlier, the game incorporates many different gameplay features, like factories and automation, which immediately reminds us of games like Factorio or Satisfactory. Then there's farming, base building, breeding, and dungeon exploration. But of course the heart of the game are the pals, and they are supposedly a key ingredient for every gameplay feature I mentioned. Like in Pokémon, you can of course use your pals in combat and boss battles, but here you are actually not just a bystander, but actively participate in a battle by using guns, melee weapons and bows. But you can do so much more with your pals. It's actually a bit crazy just how much we can do with them. For instance, you can build an army of workers with your pals, even essentially make them slaves. The game doesn't call it that, of course, but it honestly does look like that's what's happening. You can, additionally, make use of the unique abilities to help your production, which is something I'm very much looking forward to, since every pal seems to have its own area of expertise. You can take them with you for dungeon exploration, and you can combine them to breed unique pals. Many monster designs here are clearly heavily inspired by a certain franchise, but they are still different enough to give them their own charm and character. I think so at least. And apparently, they are also just distinct enough to avoid copyright infringement. The thing that's interesting to me and which I believe will be decisive, whether this is gonna be a success or not, is if they can implement all these features in a way so that the various different gameplay elements and design choices complement each other, instead of preventing the game from reaching its potential due to too many features colliding with each other. It will also be interesting to see what the actual endgame looks like once you have captured and trained your army of pals and maxed them out. Are there still incentives to keep playing? Are there cool NPCs and traders to interact with and buy cool stuff from? Are the dungeons and loot interesting? Are the survival aspects implemented with thought and care? Or just thrown in there to market the game as a survival game? This game aims to release in January 2024, but we have still seen relatively little actual gameplay footage. Additionally, the new trailer that should have been released on Monday was postponed with no explanation at all. So if past game releases are anything to go by, there is enough reason to be skeptical about this game until we have seen a real proper game presentation, like the one from Hogwarts Legacy. Say about that game what you want, but the game presentation was really transparent and set the right expectations. This game presents a unique blend of gameplay elements, which makes it appealing to a broad audience. For now, my verdict here is that if you're a monster collecting, an enthusiast, survival and crafting game fan, and don't mind the potential lack of polish and development that could be the case in its early access release, as well as the depiction of violence, then there is little reason to not be at least a bit excited for this title. However, for traditional Pokémon fans, who only caught interest in this game because it's similar to Pokémon, I'm personally not convinced that your expectations will be met here. If this video did help you out one way or another, a like is very much appreciated. It really does help with my video's performance. See ya.